and welcome to one more of the Torino Film Lab's panel on audience design. For those of you who don't know what is the Torino Film Lab, there is something really wrong with the communication if you don't know it by now. It is an international lab based here in Turin for working with projects from all over the world, developing them from different stages, from synopsis stage, script stage, post-production, production, basically all the stages in different various workshops and labs. One of the unique programs that the Torino Film Lab has is a program called Audience Design, where it basically tries to train people to be audience designers. You see they look like regular people. And we have here Benjamin and Greta. They are two audience designers that went through our labs and now working in their professional life. And they are here to present to you what is audience design, give you some test cases, show you some test cases that they've been working on, and also answer your questions if you have some. If you won't have, I'll ask for you, don't worry. So please, Jordan.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. My name is Benjamin Kölle. I'm working for the Torino Film Lab since 2014. I have a background as a producer for fiction and documentaries, but also cross-platform projects. And now I'm teaching film production at Film University Babelsberg in Germany, Potsdam. And also work here at Torino Film Lab as audience designer. Yeah.
And hi, I'm Greta. I have a background a little bit in outreach and distribution, but actually now I'm working for the production company Vivo Film, which is based in Rome, and also I am an audience designer for Torino Film Lab, and we've been working together since 2015, I believe, so we've worked together on many, many beautiful projects.
Yeah, actually we both work together at the moment as well, so that's a nice occasion to come here, but we wanted to give you first a little introduction into what audience design is. Then Greta will present a case study she did 3 years ago. 2017, and I will do a case study that I did last year in 2018. So, who of you has heard of audience design ever? Maybe just raise your hands. Oh, that's 2 people. And 3. No, audience design. No. And all of those who heard about it, do you know what it is? No. Wonderful. Because that's why we're here, that you get an understanding of it. I start from the very basics. I hope this is a bit bigger than yesterday, yes. So I think at the root of filmmaking is always this tension between, on the one hand, we have film as an artwork, which is very complex and beautiful and has lots of aspects and has its own right as an artwork. And on the other hand, we have to think about how we reach an audience with this film, because ultimately we do films to make people engaging with them, to watch them at least, and to find those people. And that's why Torino Film Lab founded this audience design program to negotiate this tension, conflict, which is maybe not always a conflict, but it's definitely a challenge, because it is really something that is inherently in every filmmaking process, that you want to do art, but you also want to do also want to reach your audience. And what we do with audience design, we make this tension productive. We want to really work with it. We don't want to say it's not there. We just want to make it productive and work with it. So the definition of audience design is written also in the book that was published. I will later share a link with you where you can download it from the Torino Film Lab website. It's a very concise work that Lena Thiele and Valeria Richter put together, that founded the program in 2012. the process of creating audience awareness and engagement around films from an early stage of development through a story-based and multi-angle approach. So very important here is that it's story-based. So a director, friend of mine, he asked me the other day, so what are you doing? Are you those guys who tell me what I have to change in my story in order that I reach more people? And I said, no, that's exactly not it. Because story-based means we take the story as our first raw material and we want to work with the story first. That's what we always start with. So, and multi-angle means that we have different ways of approaching this process of how to engage audiences. It, first of all, is a collaborative practice, and that's the most beautiful thing. We just experienced this today again. If you sit around a table with people, it's beautiful because there's lots of different approaches. You sit together with world sales, with distributors, with producers, with writers, with directors, always depending on which stage you are. In the beginning, you rather work with writers, directors, and producers. Later on, also with distributors. But sitting around that table and changing ideas is very nice because everybody brings something else on the table and you really start to understand the story more and more and you really get on the same page more and more to really understand what the story might be about. And it is a set of tools really that we developed over the years. It's like a toolbox. We always like to refer to that metaphor. So you can use some of the tools but you don't have to use all of the tools. So there's many ways of doing it, and every project is different, as you might later see with our case studies. So it's really depending on which stage you are starting to work with the project, but also, yeah, who's involved. Like in a later stage, obviously distributors, in an early stage, more writers, directors. So the classical approach to distribution of films is that distribution starts in a very late stage, really. Like it starts when the film is finished, and then suddenly people think, okay, now let's try to reach our audience, which is, in our opinion, far too late, because that's what we try to do with audience design, to start really early, to start from the very beginning to think about the audience. And it doesn't mean that you already have to design the social media campaign when you're just writing the synopsis or the first draft. It means that you think about the audience, that you take it into account, that you get inspired by it really, that it's not something that is so like evil and all about marketing, but that is something that you actually get inspired by. So we start with a story, and we think of story worlds rather than of stories, because we believe that a story is much more than a narrative that starts in A and ends at Z, but has a lot of different things to it. So the story world exploration refers to emotions, to values, to discourses, to assets like director, music, scenography, but then also how the story is told, what kind of genre it talks about, is it, what kind of story tropes are used, and obviously also what kind of reference films we can think of when we think of that story. And then we do the same with the audience, because you could also say we think of audience worlds rather than just the audience, because we want to go beyond this demographic of what people always refer to as art house audience, like women over 50 in urban areas. And we say that this is really much more complex than that. And we dig deep and we want to take people seriously. And then I think thinking of audience also means to go beyond the stereotypes and beyond the typical target groups that marketing people speak about. It really is about understanding the audience, trying to really think who could these people be that are interested in our story. What are they doing every day? Where are they coming from? What are their beliefs? What are their values? What kind of communities they feel related to? And all these things, and we think about personas, so we really think about concrete people that we want to understand. It really is about trying to understand it and then connect these two, like to connect the story and and the audience with each other. So that was the question that was asked before, why we don't call it audience building or audience engagement. In other contexts it's called like that. We call it audience design, and that refers to a certain kind of practice that is lent from design thinking. I don't know if you heard about that before, but it means that we work in prototypes and in iterative circles. So we never say we have now explored the audience completely, or we have explored the story completely, and this is how it is now. We really use it as a prototype, and we go back to it if it's necessary. So, for example, if the strategy that we develop in a certain moment doesn't work anymore with the story exploration or the audience exploration, we might go back to the story and think of it again, and think about how we explore the audience, and so it's always this iterative circles, and we try to go as best to the perfect example, but we might never reach it completely, but that's already clear that we can never explain the complete world. We cannot find the complete truth, but we try to go as close as possible by always coming back and adjusting each prototype. So the last step would be the implementation, and again, we might adjust our strategy when we feel that something doesn't work, and that's really important to keep in mind, because it's not that we deliver a strategy and then it's just played out. We really go back and ask the questions: does it really work? Do we have to think about something else, and maybe we have to adjust something? So this is basically the playful attitude of audience design, rather than just reaching an audience, because yeah, we might find out that the audience is different now. So as I said, there's a certain way we do it at Torino Film Lab, which is written in the book, and this is, I will go through this a little bit briefly, because I want you to encourage you that you download the book and read it. So this is basically the 4 steps that we work with in Torino Film Lab. Basically, it is very much what I already said. So we discover in the beginning, we really look at the story, we really dig deep, we explore in a 360-degree view. Then we develop the strategy, where we really look more detailed into the audiences. What are they doing, where are they hanging out, and how we can connect the story and the audience. Then we design the strategy, and then it's really also about concrete things like time plan, goals. It's very important to define the goals, because for some films it might be reaching this and this. For example, I'm just working on a project with Argentina, and they said, for us it's much more important to create a discourse in society around teenage pregnancy, rather than having a lot of admissions in the cinema, which totally changes the strategy, because for them it really is about the topic, and because they know that it's really difficult to compete on a market in Argentina where like this kind of art house films have a hard time. So they said, for us it's much more important to use all our resources to get this discourse going, what the film talks about. So if you have that goal, it obviously is another strategy needed than if you really want to go for the most admissions as possible. So it's really important to define the goals. Also to make a time plan, which is an issue we just encountered in our project today, because we all know we're very busy people, and it's not very good to make a time planning where it's totally not realistic that we do this and this and this in this time, when we all know already now that we don't have time. So it's very, very hands-on, and it's not rocket science, but it's very important to keep that in mind if you want to go cohesive and in a really sustainable way, also with your own resources. Yeah, so what we do in the design work is then that we connect the communication platforms with the distribution platforms, and deliver the strategy, and of course, which is also important, always feedback with the team. Are we still on the same page? Is this going in the right way? So it really is this design thinking method that we really try to not say we have now the perfect strategy, but maybe we have to go back to it. And at the end, it really is about communication and team building. And this is also one thing I love about audience design, that it really brings the team together. It really is about bringing the team together, and sometimes producers and distributors don't even talk to each other properly, or even if a producer and a director develop the project together for years, they still might have complete different agendas with the film, and it's really important to find out about this and to bring them on the same page, and to even like go through conflicts in that moment, and to then say, okay, look, what should we do with this film? Is it this way or is it that way? And maybe we can find a solution for that. So it really is about team building and also like conflict like management in a way. So delivery. That's obviously something that is also then done by the different partners that you work with. So we will not tell as audience designers how World Sales has to communicate the film to different distributors in different countries. But we can say them, look, this is what we found out, what we find interesting about the film. Maybe you can use these assets to talk about the film. Or we don't want to tell the Israeli distributor how to reach his audience in Israel because he knows that much better. But we can give him some assets that he can use for doing the strategy. So it really is about creating these packages for different people that they can use it, but also to follow up on the time plan, on the actions, and to connect them all, to really make sure that these things that you talked about are really done, or maybe are not done, and then you ask the question why they were not implemented, and then you might find out, oh, that doesn't work because the strategy that we thought was working doesn't work, so you might have to change your strategy again. So that's very important to always keep fresh and also make sure that you have a long-term plan, which is also forgotten sometimes. Yeah, so just two more sentences, so that's almost never too late and definitely never too early to start with audience design. We have 2 case studies now. One of them started a bit earlier than the other, so you will see that each distribution phase is different, and that you have to really adjust your strategy to the specific distribution moment where you are starting with the audience design. So each project phase is different. And yeah, have fun and stay playful. That's very important as well. Okay, now I hand over to Greta.
I can do it, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. Now, if we just have a couple of case studies, so maybe you can better understand how we bring everything that Benjamin has talked about into reality, applying it to two very different projects that, of course, each strategy and each audience design thoughts or anyway implementation is very different because since it's based on story, it's completely different from film to film. I wanted to talk about The Wound, which is a film that came out in 2017, I believe. Yes, it's a South African film, but it was co-produced with Germany, the Netherlands, and France. Sorry, it's a lot of countries, and it won a lot of awards, and it was presented in a lot of co-production markets all over Europe, but the world. And then towards the end of its post-production, it also won the Torino Film Lab Audience Design Fund, which is where we came in. So we stepped into the projects when it was the sound design was about to be finished, and then so we started working with them a little bit, and then we did the workshop when the film was finished, and they started to get the first festival invitations. So I remember that while we were discussing, they were deciding where the premiere of the film would be. The story of The Wound is very, very strong. It takes place in South Africa, in the mountains. There is one of the biggest populations of South Africa, the Xhosa population, has this very strong tradition of rite of passage from boyhood to manhood, where all the boys go to the mountains, they get circumcised, and they have to spend like a month healing from the circumcision. And they are accompanied by adults who are guardians, and this rite of passage is a taboo. You cannot talk about it once you get down from the mountain. So it's a very powerful and strong ritual, but that's just for you and your community, for no one else. And so in the setting of this rite of passage, it talks the story about Solani, pronounce it very badly, but who is an adult, and he has decided to be the guardian or caretaker of his cousin, who is a young boy from the city, who his father thinks is too soft. So he asks him to make a man out of his son. However, in the little by little, this young boy finds out that Solani actually has a love story with another caretaker, which is strongly forbidden. And the story develops around this. It's a very, very powerful story, and actually the film was very successful also because of this, because the premiere in the end was at Sundance in the international competition, but then it opened Panorama in Berlinale, it won awards all over the world, it was even in the short list for the foreign Oscar nomination. Then it wasn't nominated, but anyway, it was among the 9 best films for the Academy, foreign films for the Academy. And it was distributed and sold in a lot of countries all over the world. It's a really beautiful film if you want to see it. And it's very, very powerful. When they came to us, the producer already prepared a very, very strong distribution strategy and marketing strategy. So they had already very, very clear ideas about what they wanted to do or how they wanted to do it. But at the same time, we started again the whole process, as Benjamin was describing, and we really asked what their goals were, which were a bit diversified. For the biggest goal they had was really challenge patriarchal notion of manhood in Africa, which is, and they wanted to raise discussion about it and how it is not possible to continue with the traditional idea of a man, or what is a man in Africa right now. They also wanted to build the careers of both the director, because it's his first film, and the production company, because the production company made, I think this was the second feature film that they made. And also they wanted to make money, of course, because they wanted to build a sustainable career for themselves. We also looked at what their challenges were, because apart from the fact that, you know, it's an art house film, so it would probably have a limited release, the biggest problem was that in South Africa it was for sure going to be a big scandal around this movie, because as I was saying, talking about the ritual is taboo. It's a big, big taboo. You cannot talk about it. And even if actually the film doesn't reveal much about the ritual itself, apart from what is known by the general public, anyway, it takes place in it. So, and moreover, it places a gay love story in this setting. So it's like a bomb going on, at least in South Africa, and they knew it, that there was going to be this problem. The other problem was also being accused of cultural appropriation, because the director is South African, but he's white, and the producer, one is Brazilian, and the other one is a white woman. All the actors, the screenwriters, and a lot of the crew were all from the Xhosa community, but still, you know, the most prominent figures are not from the community, so that was going to be a problem. And also the other 2 problems that we really tried to understand, especially about the South African distribution, was that piracy is a huge problem in South Africa. Everybody pirates the film, but also if they wanted to create a discussion about the patriarchal notion of what it means to be a man, maybe they should talk to the community itself, and they should reach out to more rural communities. But the problem is those communities don't have any access to cinemas. So how do we do this? So as Benjamin was saying, we went back to the story. Once we realize what the context was, we went back to the story. These are a few posters that were used in different distribution in different territories. And the main poster of the film is the in Seba, because that's the name, the title in Hausa. The rest, I think, is French, British, and Spanish. And we really talked about how also the visuals could communicate the story, because in the end, it is a story about love. It's not a story that actually wants to challenge the patriarchal in a very, very political way. The politics of the film are very subtle. They just pass by the story of two men who love each other, who cannot be together during their life. They can just be together in this month they spend in the mountains, and they have to do so anyway in secret, because if they are found, they will probably be killed. And around this theme of just love, we built the whole strategy, because which also depends depending on the different territories. You know, the biggest theme, as I was saying, was forbidden love, but it was also, you know, about it's a film about the impossibility of being true to yourself. At least the main character is a man who is not also very much considered like a true man, because he's gay and he cannot marry the love of his life. He has decided not to marry at all. And for this reason, he's seen as a little bit of an outcast, but at least he's living what he thinks is true to himself. So it's also a question about identity. And how you can be true to yourself, but at the same time be respectful and be part of the tradition of your community. And then, of course, especially in Europe, or in the US, in the Western world anyway, we were thinking about how it could be very powerful to talk about this secret ritual that nobody knows about. Because, well, we all have the tendency to orientalize a little bit, or at least see these exotic things that are very far from our culture, and we thought we could play a little bit on that. And finally, we really realized that what the directors and producers themselves wanted to do was just create a safe space for discussion, to discuss really what this film meant to anybody who saw it, no matter what the director and producer or anybody who was already involved with the film thought. You know, that's the only way where you can really foster a good dialogue with your audience, just to create a safe space where everybody could say whatever they wanted. And these are a bit of the results. This is what we discussed in our workshops, and we recommended a few things, like really keeping the discussion open and creating safe spaces for the community to see the film. So, for example, what they did was organizing a lot of avant premieres in the countryside where they had no access to cinema, so they created solar-powered free screenings for the community. And they also filmed a lot of the reactions that the audience was having. And these were Hausa communities who were watching the film. So actually the discussion was amazing, because most of the people who saw the film were very, very accepting of it. And also, as I was saying, they decided to let the audience speak freely about the film. So, for example, if you go to their social media channels, the comments are not moderated. And you will see that most of them, there are huge, very big discussions that are very, very negative, because in the end there was a scandal. Most of the people in South Africa, as soon as they knew what the film was about, they just started offending everything and everybody, because they went against their tradition. And so there was a big call of boycotting the film, the cinemas, filmmakers, everybody received death threats. It was a very difficult challenge, but at least, you know, they let this rage on, like they didn't censor it at all. You know, the rage was there, so it was worth for them to for everybody to see that this was an issue for this community, but why was it an issue? They wanted the discussion among the audience to be freely, so you will see there is not, they don't even comment or reply. It's all a conversation between the audience themselves and the different points of view that the spectators have. And they listen to really everybody, so also they posted themselves also negative criticism on their Facebook page because they wanted to encourage discussion. The problem then became a bit more serious because I don't remember who, but they put an appeal for the censorship of the movie. So after the movie had already been released in cinema, it received an X rating, which meant it could only be screened in porn cinemas. And so it was took out of the cinemas, and while they were preparing the legal fight for the film to be released again with rated 14 as it was originally chosen, they knew that they could not ignore the response that they were getting from the audience, because anyway, in the first 2 weeks, they had 30,000 admissions, which was their overall goal for distribution in South Africa, and they did it in 2 weeks. So they were sure they could, you know, keep going on with this film. Plus, they were outraged by the fact that they were censored, rightly. So what they did was, on the one hand, on their official channels, they switched the conversation to a much more political one, really discussing, you know, why is gay love means that it's porn. It's not porn. It's just, we have sex scenes in every film with an heterosexual couple. Why cannot there be a sex scene with a gay couple? So they started pushing this conversation more and more. While on the opposite side, we were, because there was the issue about piracy and the film would be pirated anyway, they decided to distribute a few copies of pirated DVDs and pirated links themselves, so that the audience who were interested in the film but did not have access to the money to attend the cinema, or anyway they could not watch the cinema, could keep watching it and could keep the conversation alive. So the film actually kept trending on Twitter for months and months, until they finally won the legal battle to put the film back in cinemas, and actually that not a huge release in cinema after, but it kept being present in cinemas for quite a long time after too. And now actually it's something that I saw from 2 or 3 weeks ago. They are asking for the Wound 2. The audience themselves are asking for the Wound 2. And this is, I think, very nice, because it really meant that they were able to create a connection and dialogue with the audience, no matter how, and this played in their favor, because then they kept winning a lot of awards. They kept, you know, earning money from the sale of the film worldwide, but also from the tickets. And so they really, and also, most importantly, the political discussion about this theme in South Africa is much more rich and different after the film was released. So they achieved all their goals by really, in some way, a bit partnering with their audiences, or you know, creating a meaningful relationship with them. But that's it for at least the Wound.
Okay, we have to hurry up a little bit, I think. As you see, we speak about fundamental human questions here, and we take the plane and we fly to another part of the world. So we're going northeast, I guess, a little bit to Tel Aviv. This is the second case study, Tel Aviv on Fire, a film that premiered in 2017 at Venice. 18, yeah, 2018 in Venice, exactly. In the Horizonte section, it's a French, Israeli, Belgian, Luxembourg co-production, directed by Sami Zouabi, and it's a comedy. It tries to look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from a satirical point of view, and basically making the statement that we are not so different after all, because we are all watching the same soap operas, we are interested in the same issues like love and friendship, and we all love hummus. This film is really taking a very nice, like, poetic, funny, and satirical point to tell the story of a young guy that is working in a TV soap opera, and he is starting to co-write the story, and the guy that he gets checked by every day at the checkpoint, an Israeli soldier, loves this soap opera as well, and he starts to co-write with him the story to impress his wife, who loves the soap opera as well. So as you can think, it takes all turns and twists at the end, and it's a very entertaining and witty comedy. So these are the facts I just talked about. It had a really well festival run, obviously, premiering in Venice, winning lots of awards. And what we did, we stepped in the time when it was about thinking about the theatrical releases in 3 territories, in France, Belgium, and Israel. So we had to focus on how to communicate this film to the different audiences in France, Belgium, and Israel, which was obviously quite challenging, because the goals that the filmmakers had were basically quite simple ones. They wanted to have a successful distribution in the territories. They wanted to create a constant buzz around the film. So it was more like the kind of quite obvious goals. It was not as advanced as here with the Wound, that they obviously wanted to talk about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and all to basically give people the idea that actually we are all the same, so to say, and that the politics divides us doesn't mean that most of the people want to live together and want to live in peace. But for the film themselves, they obviously wanted to have it to make it more successful, because in the very beginning they were also, when we started to talk about the film and go more into the core of the story, we really wanted to not emphasize too much that this is a film about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As you all know, it's the killer of every dinner evening when you start about talking about this, because everybody has different opinions on it, and it's very difficult to find a solution because it's too complex anyway. So we thought we want to really use the strength of the film, and the more we went into it, we found out that it's actually, things like hummus, things like soap operas, things like love that connect people. So we wanted to more emphasize the connection that the film talks about, rather than the conflict that the film talks about, which is obviously there, and we didn't want to kind of ignore, but we really wanted to emphasize that it's a witty, funny comedy, and actually a nice way to talk about this conflict, rather than getting discussed and then shouting at each other. So that was basically what we did, and the more we identified the core of the story, we went into the themes, into this exploring the story world, as I explained before. The more we could help the team to really do their digital campaign mostly, because what really helped, and that is the feedback from the film team very much, they succeeded very well in France and in Belgium with the campaign, because they used all these different issues that we identified in the story to target different audiences on social media. And They're very successful with that, and that also translated into admissions in the cinema, and they exceeded their expectations of the film a lot. So they had much more admissions in French cinemas and in Belgian cinemas than they expected before. And they wrote in the final report, which film teams are writing after the audience design process, that they were so thankful for this audience design process, because it really helped them to identify what richness this film is, and that they could actually communicate that directly to their audiences. And actually audiences responded really well, especially on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, that was very nice. Although in Israel it didn't work so well, unfortunately, we didn't manage to go beyond that issue of the conflict, which they call it. And people just saw it as another film about the conflict, so they were like, oh no, please. And they felt like, as it is kind of, as it is a Palestinian director, especially the Israeli audience felt like, oh yeah, it's another film about how bad us Israelis are, which turned them off the movie, which was what the Israeli distributor told us. But yeah, you cannot be always successful with everything, and but as I said, it worked really well, and the film team was very, very happy about the whole process. Yeah, as I said, you can download the book or PDF. You can also download the PDF and save the environment and read it on your screen. Torino Film Lab website, I copied the link there. You can also try to find it by yourself. It's not that easy, but you will succeed. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions regarding the two?
Hello. Hello. Thanks for all the information and the cases. I was wondering two things. How much of the audience design you do, and considering that it's films that take place in different countries and stuff, based on real research on the audiences and not assumptions of what the young audiences could want in this country or this other stuff like that, and how what it means in terms of the budget for the marketing campaigns, because maybe you find that you want to develop a specific actions that require certain budget, so you avoid some traditional actions more broad, and you direct the budget toward what is more original or directed, or keep the traditional. So my question would be about the research and the budget.
It's a very good question, and I think that's what the future, or where we should go, because audience design is a kind of a new concept, and so it's in evolution itself. It's an open concept which is still being formed, and so we still have to work on it together to really find out a recipe that works. For the data, I think there is, of course, we make our research. The workshop is a bit more creative, but then it's based on research. The problem is that a lot of us, we still don't have access to data. There are a few very nice institutions that publish data, but they're always from the years before. So what is the present is very difficult to know if you're not a huge platform or things like that. So I think this is an issue that we have worldwide at the moment, because the access to data is very, very important at this moment, where the industry is in transformation, but at the same time, especially independent producers and distributors don't have the means to access to it. So this is an issue. And the other question, sorry?
budget?
The budget, I think that, yes, if you start, the idea of audience design is starting early to think about the marketing and communication so that you can also be smarter about the budget and you can really decide what you have and also maybe allocate a bit of your production budget into the communication because it will be worth down the road, and also maybe avoid things that don't make sense either for your goals or for the specificity of the territories where you are distributing.
Yeah, just a short thing about the budget as well. Like, first of all, there's concrete money from Audience Design Fund as well, which helps the distribution campaign. It's not a lot, but it helps. And especially in territories like Argentina or South Africa, it is a relevant amount of money. And also, projects that think about audience in the beginning will render themselves more successful on the market as well. So it already helps to implement that in the very early stage. So I guess if this is becoming more a culture of production to think about audience early, it also helps you to create. But you also asked about the strategy. So it is, as I said, a toolbox. Of course, we use traditional things like SWOT analysis, for example, or we use like traditional digital campaign, Facebook, Instagram marketing. Of course, we use these kind of traditional tools as well. But we also use new things, and we try to be more experimental with campaigning, with like creating actions and creating like campaigns, really like political campaigns maybe on the issue of the film. So we use both. We are using the toolbox. And just about data very shortly, it is obviously a problem that Facebook and Netflix is collecting a lot of data and they really know what the audience is about. And yes, we do not have so much access to that, but there are ways to get to data, so you just have to be really keen on it. And as Greta said, audience designers then, after the workshop, we go even deeper then, and we research on, like, for example, when we find out that we want to do something within that audience, we then go deeper. We do something like netnography. You know, it's like ethnography in the net. So you really look into the different communities. You go to Facebook, Instagram, you look what our communities are talking about. You really go as an ethnographer in the net, in the internet, so to say. And you because in the internet you see a lot, you know, you can really dig deep into the communities and see already the tone, how they talk to each other. You learn a lot about what the audience are about, you know, like what languages they use, and that obviously will be the language that you try to engage them with as well. And there's data as well from European Union, for example. There's data from all kind of different institutions that provide data, so you just have to be a bit more, if you're not Netflix, you have to be more creative, and you have to really look for it, but eventually you will find it. It just needs more time.
I will ask you two questions, please. One is, do you think that every film can have an audience design strategy? I mean, from, as you said, comedies, things like this, or do you feel that audience design strategy can work better to a specific kind of film, be it art house, social things like this? Or do you think that it can reach anything?
My personal opinion is that every film can benefit from this because it's, as Benjamin was saying, it's a really like a toolbox, and first of all, I think it's very valuable to use the toolbox of audience design to have the time to reflect a bit on your film from a different point of view, which is the point of view of the audience that changes often your whole perspective in the movie. And a lot of the time we don't have the luxury as producers, distributors, to really focus and take, 3-4 days to just think about this. So I think this is very valuable for every film. Then I wanted to say something else, but I forgot. No, I think, like, for example, I mean, they don't call it audience design, but it's just, a way of just really being smart to and know well the story that you are trying to tell to the world, and what are the potentials of that story and how you can make it come to life. So it's just for me at least, a process of being smart and realistic about what you can do and how you can do it well.
Yeah, and also, like, of course, we have the luxury to work within Torino Film Lab, so we have projects that are quite, well developed, which I think is key to film development, to filmmaking. Take time for development, and these films are developed through Torino Film Lab, so they're really developed in a good way. That means they are quite successful on festivals, and of course it's easier to take a film that premiered in Orizzonti, Venice, or in Cannes than a film that has not this kind of festival outreach, of course. And of course it's more easy to use a comedy than an artcore, as we call it, a film that is really like very, slow and, like very, not very audience friendly. But I agree with Greta that every film can benefit from it. It will be more challenging for some films, but for example, documentaries, I think it really proved, in my experience, very, very useful, because documentaries are mostly talking about contemporary, current issues that are very important, and you can really use audience design a lot and very well for documentaries, and especially documentaries have it a hard time to be successful in the cinema. So, like sometimes even these films that have it the hardest can benefit the most, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second question goes to the other side of audience design, as Torino Film Lab does not only work on projects, they're also training people to become audience designers like you. What is it that it takes in order to be an audience designer from your point of view? Which people? It's producers, directors, writers, businessmen. What is it? What are the tools that you need in order to be a good audience designer, I would say?
Okay, maybe we can collect. For me, the first thing would be the love of films.
Definitely. I think having a very creative and open mind also, and not be afraid to say stupid things also, because it takes a lot of saying stupid things for one great thing to come.
But is it important? Do you need to come with knowledge of marketing, distribution? Do you need to know something before you start these workshops, or you can start from scratch just loving films?
For me personally, it was very useful. I had already a background in distribution a little bit, but not mostly distribution. I was working in outreach and crowdfunding campaigns, so I was working a lot with the audience already, and and that changed my mind a lot, because I never thought, I just thought you make the movie and then you put it out, and then it's the audience duty to find it, but it's impossible. It's not true. It's not realistic. So that was useful, because even if it was a very different kind of work from audience design, it was a lot of research based on how audiences are, so I already had a certain mindset, and I think that's useful. At least, I wouldn't say that maybe everyone has to have a background, but at least know the industry a little bit, yes.
Yeah, I would definitely also agree. You should know what the industry in, let's say, the European film industry is about, what players are there, like from writers, directors to world sales, producers, distributors, how our films are done in Europe, because most of the projects we do here are European co-productions. You have to know what are the current situation. You should know a little bit about the current situation of the market. And yeah, I mean, I was just this year in TFL Extended. You can apply for becoming an audience designer, and you will have a workshop for 4 days here in Turin. And we are very happy, especially to invite producers from local producers, because that's very much important. So the people that were there, one of them was a film student. She was just finishing her master degrees in film production. Another one was from England. She had a background in distribution. Another one was working with festivals. So, like there's lots of different ways, but you should know a little bit, you should have a bit of experience in a professional industry experience, at least a little bit. But then everything else can be taught.
Yeah. Now, if there are no more questions, we can wrap it. Yeah.
Just at what stage of the project do you suggest to start audience design?
As we said, it's never too early.
So if you finish your script before that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, it's really good to start early. In a moment, even like when you have the first idea, you could already speak about it. And because in the funny way that my experience was also in university, I found out it's a very good tool to story develop as well. So to make clear what is your story, where's your story going. But in order to really have an idea what the film as film will be about, I think it's the best. It's the rough cut stage, because then you really know how the film will be. Of course, you can start earlier, and I would always recommend to start early. But it's another thing, another way of working with the film when you only have the script, when you have already the rough cut. Because with the rough cut, you really see how the whole thing comes together, how the actors are working, what kind of tone the film has, and so on. But
basically, would you say that the audience hints you on how to develop the project? It's
yeah, you have to be specific. You have to be specific on each project phase. In the very beginning, it's much more about like also thinking about the story. Then you're much more with the story, and the later it becomes, the more you think about how to reach like how to talk to the audience. But you already think about the audience, but in another way in the early stage than in a later stage.
Both-sided, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.